Wendy Brown's In the Ruins of Neoliberalism asks the question, how did we get here? To a shockingly unjust world filled with Trumps, Erdogans and Bolsonaros, and how this world evolved from an ideology that was ostensibly meant to guarantee freedom. Is today's world order an aberration, or was neoliberalism always destined to consolidate into autocracy? To answer this question, Brown starts with the assertion that neoliberal theory, from its roots, was always meant to be anti-democratic, privilege power and profit over people and collectivity. She cites in particular Friedrich Hayek. Hayek believed that attempts to overly arrange or direct society, such as communism or even social democracy, were exercises in futility that could only lead to tyranny. For this reason, he decried the concept of social justice, things like welfare, and any notion of affirmative action or mass politics in which groups had self-determination. Instead, Hayek believed that society and its morals should be arranged spontaneously and naturally, as is the logic of the free market. Hayek believed that the source of these spontaneously organized morals would be tradition, asserting that traditional moral laws, which include things like binary heteronormative gender roles, class hierarchy, etc., should form the moral order of society. Hayek left unquestioned the values of his time, or more specifically, a conservative subset, and believed that only a society organically, not through government prescription and control, organized by such values, could thrive. Ironically, Hayek admitted that such values were already being worn away in contemporary society, and that in order to re-establish the system of morals, a government would have to intervene and significantly alter the moral order of the time. A final interesting note on Hayek is that he didn't believe that the free market would intuitively reward hard work, as is so often touted, but would rather only reward contributions. As such, you could work hard all your life, but if you did not produce something that the market considered to be a significant contribution, you could expect no reward. The other major source of neoliberal theory cited by Brown is the German ordoliberal tradition. The ordoliberals believed that society should consist of a free market in which the purview of government was limited exclusively to maintaining conditions in which such a market could operate smoothly. They believed that governance based on business and finance expertise was preferable to government which legislated based on the mass will of the people. They stipulated that the democratic functions of governance should be limited, with public opinion replaced by the logic of the market and technical expertise. The ordoliberals even suggested that elections and representative democracy should remain specifically to maintain an illusion of public choice and democracy, while the real decisions were made by experts of business. Hayek and the ordoliberals have in common that they believe a society consciously directed by the will of the people can only end in disaster, and that instead the spontaneity of markets, the values of traditional morality, and the decisions of experts should control society. They represent a project to reduce the governmental purview of public opinion and the masses, and expand the realm of the private, property, capital, the family, and traditional values, out and over society, assuming a controlling role. Now let's look at some of Brown's examples of these ideas manifesting in the contemporary world. One example of the neoliberal impulse to replace democracy with technical expertise comes in the form of Donald Trump's Office of American Innovation. Led by Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. The office is advertised by the White House as a SWAT team aimed at fixing government with business ideas. Kushner says of his new department, "The government should be run like a great American company. Our hope is that we can achieve successes and efficiencies for our customers, who are the citizens." In analyzing these statements, Brown posits that they represent the displacement of democratic rule with policing and management, along with the disintegration of society into units of production and consumption, and notes how it is companies, not customers, that seek successes and efficiencies. Another example used by Brown are two court cases. Both feature courts finding in favor of private businesses in their desire to exclude and misinform legally under the protection of freedom of speech and expression laws. One of these involves Masterpiece Cake Shop versus Colorado Civil Rights Commission, in which the owner of a cake shop fights to legally deny services based on custom cake making to same-sex wedding ceremonies. The owner states that to make such cakes would go against his personal and religious beliefs, and to put it simply, the court finds that he can indeed claim protections designed for individual people even though he is acting as a business. In the second case, National Institute of Family Life Advocates DBA NIFLA et al. Versus Becerra, Attorney General of California, Crisis Pregnancy Centers, or CPCs, fight for their legal right to not distribute information to patients that the state of California has legislated must be readily available. CPCs are centers in the United States, often with religious or financial backing, that seek to dissuade prospective mothers against having abortions. They purchase ads on Google to ensure that their details come up when women search things like abortions near me or I need an abortion now. They also open their centers very close to planned pregnancy centers, which do offer abortion services. Sometimes they even open their stores in spots where planned pregnancy used to operate, to further confuse and make the difference ambiguous. The services actually offered in CPCs are deceptively called things like abortion counseling, when in fact they are often extremely confronting anti-abortion tirades designed to guilt, traumatize, and upset those seeking abortions into reconsidering. It is demonstrable through these designs that CPCs seek to misinform and trick women into being exposed to their anti-abortion rhetoric. This is significant because in their court case, the CPCs sought to gain the legal right not to have in their centers State of California pamphlets which informed clients of the availability, safety, and legality of abortions. The CPCs were fighting for their right to misinform and propagandize on the subject of abortions based on their religious and ideological beliefs, and they were granted this right under freedom of speech and expression laws. In all three of these examples, we see democracy and the collective will sublimated and replaced by traditional values and technocratic governance. Kushner's office seeks to regulate and reshape governance based on business imperatives instead of democratic will, and the affirmative action and democratic inclusivity of abortion information and queer cake services lose to private business granted freedom to exercise beliefs based on traditional values. The private realm of personal beliefs or traditional morality, as Hayek would put it, is expanded to replace the public and allowed to govern aspects of commerce and medicine. Brown's final insight that I wish to touch on has to do with the nihilistic devaluation of values. Brown, via Nietzsche and Marcuse, sketches how values and morals have lost their weight in the modern world, become instrumentalized, trivial. Brown writes, when a Martin Luther King Jr. speech about public service is used to advertise Dodge trucks during the Super Bowl, when Catholic clergy are revealed to have molested thousands of children while their superiors look away, when moral values politicians are exposed for consorting with prostitutes or making abortion payments for mistresses, these things bring not shock, but a knowing grimace, nihilism's signature. Values no longer have meaning. How did we get here? Nietzsche famously wrote that the rise of science and reason, which dethroned or killed God and other symbols of more or less arbitrary values, led us to this place. But Brown goes further. She writes how nihilism and its devaluation of morals unhinge the subject from its conscience. If values have no meaning, why should you care about doing wrong? Next, Brown makes a complex but vital point via Marcuse. The process I've described above, the releasing of individuals from the constraints of their conscience, is called by Brown and her interlocutors the desublimation of the will to power, setting free your will to power. Marcuse calls this desublimation under neoliberal capitalism repressive desublimation. In such a circumstance, our mind is not just freed from morals, but also free to consume. In the neoliberal world, pleasure, whether it be sexual or through other consumption, no longer needs to be repressed. Instead, it is co-opted by capital. The consumer is today perhaps the greatest commodity there is. Marcuse writes how our mind is free from moral conscience, but also largely free from the need to plan for survival. We live in abundance, and thus our mind is free to ponder, engage in, and become addicted to trivial things, thus a freedom which is repressive, a repressive desublimation. By freeing us to consume without limit or moral reflection, the nihilistic neoliberal order makes us willing, unthinking cogs. Taken as a whole, these thinkers paint a picture of a world where it is easy to understand how religious or moral conservatives can support someone as amoral as Trump, and also generally the shocking brutality of the alt-right. There is no conscience to listen to anymore. This is Brown's idea of neoliberalism. It is built perhaps on foundations which were never meant to be democratic in the first place. The private and traditional values rule over democracy, but even those who tout such tradition are by no means really bound by them, or anything. Where do we go from here? This is the question Brown leaves us with.